afternoon, everybody. Holy cow, it's November. I can't believe it. I'm so happy that we're like so close to the finish line right now. I'm not even sure what to do with my hands. But I'm so glad that you're all joining us at Secular AZ today. And if you are joining us, feel free to put your name in the chat in the webinar. Make sure that you click that little button on the bottom of your screen that says everyone instead of to hosts and panelists so that we know who you are. As you all know, white Christian nationalism is the greatest threat to our democracy, and Secular AZ is your voice for the separation of religion and government. We are a nonprofit organization, and we act as your voice for elected officials all across the state and at every level. Next week, we're going to be debriefing on the election. So if you want to come and celebrate or commiserate, we've got you covered. But for today, we are going to be speaking with Tammy Stoss. And my favorite thing about Tammy is that I had been running into her for the longest time at the Capitol, advocating for all kinds of different things. And at one point, I was looking for some old photos of my children, and I'm looking at this picture of my daughter's preschool class picture, and I see Miss Tammy, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Tammy, our kids went to school together. And then I told my daughter, and she was like, oh yeah, I totally remember her kids. And so I love the fact that this universe that we all exist in becomes smaller and smaller the more involved that we get. But Tammy, on her own, aside from being a great preschool teacher for my daughter, she is a professional educator and a fierce advocate. She currently teaches third grade at Summit Academy, an international baccalaureate school in Mesa Public School System. In addition to being a classroom teacher, she is also the executive director of Arizona Trans Youth and Parent Organization, otherwise known as AZTYPO. In her role with AZTYPO, she has been advocating and educating in Arizona on behalf of transgender and gender diverse youth and their families for over a decade. Now, Tammy, I know that I have more of your bio, but I kind of also I could go on and on. She served as the committee chair of the LGBTQ plus subcommittee of the Equity and Inclusive Practices Advisory Council at the Arizona State Board of Education, member of the Learn to Lead team for the Arizona Education Association. She's created and presented training on topics such as raising a trans child and creating gender inclusive classrooms to groups such as the Tammy, this is amazing. Arizona Psychological Association, the Mesa Education Association, the Arizona Education Association, ASU in-service teachers, the Arizona State Legislature, and many more. I'm just going to keep going because it's so good. In addition to her education and activist work, Tammy is the mother of two children, one who identifies as a trans man and the other who identifies as non-binary. By sharing her family's journey, Tammy has been able to provide guidance, resources, and support to so many families and educators in and out of Arizona. Honestly, I got just a little verklempt reading it again because you do so much work and you've been doing this work for such a long time. And I know that recently you've come under scrutiny for the very good work that you're doing. So I'm just so glad that you're here with us today, Tammy. I'm going to just go ahead and hand it right over. Is there anything I missed in your bio?
No, in fact, as you're reading it, I'm like, I need to update that because I now teach fourth grade. I've switched from third to fourth grade this year, so I switched to grade level. But other than that, I listened to it and I'm like, ooh, maybe I need to slow down a little bit. But I just basically, if anybody will listen, I'll talk because, to me, it's really important work, and I feel so compelled to pay it forward or pay it back, I guess. I don't know. It's a little bit of both because there were so many people that were so important when my child was going through this. And I really feel like I want to change that experience for so many parents who are kind of where I was at that time. And that's kind of what motivates me and compels me to do the work.
You know what? Okay, full disclosure here. I chose a charter school for my children because I really believed in the Waldorf method. And this is before I became an educator myself, I knew that I wanted the Waldorf method for my kids. My question to you to start off is, did you was did you choose that because that was the kind of education you wanted, or did you choose that because you'd already been in the public school system and maybe it wasn't quite the right fit? Because that school, in my opinion, has, and I don't know what it's like now, but it was a very inclusive school, very inclusive.
We sought out the Waldorf. We did not have a public education prior to the Waldorf, but the break with the Waldorf, well, um, I kind of had a different experience.
Oh,
It was,
okay,
having a child who was not, I mean, I don't want to dump on Waldorf, but
sure, sure.
my child was left-handed, and they recommended him for special education because he was left-handed. Yeah. And
Oh,
yeah, the Waldorf method is to tie the hand down and force him to use the right hand. So that was kind of one of the first red flags. It was very difficult because he was not, he at the time, very gender nonconforming, and that didn't fit the mold of Waldorf. Waldorf is very, gender conforming. So it was very inclusive in some aspects, but it was very non-inclusive in some aspects.
wow. Okay, I'm
And
glad
that
that you
that
told me
was
that. Yeah.
yeah, that was years ago. I saw a question pop up in the chat. That was years ago. My son is 26 now. So that would have been, yeah, early 2000s.
Yeah. Well, shoot. Okay. And I have heard I've talked to a couple of parents who have pulled their children out of that school because apparently the new leadership is a bit Christian. And it's really pushing kind of a
Well,
more of a Christian.
and that is traditional Waldorf.
It is.
Traditional
Yeah.
Waldorf is very Christian. And,
Yeah.
that was another one of the things I was like, I'm not traditional Christian myself. And that was one of the things that I was like, I wasn't crazy about. But the other was definitely interesting to me. I'm very much a what you would call a crunchy mom, granola.
Yeah.
I loved that part about it. I love the
Yeah.
farming aspect. I love the gardening aspect of it. I love the natural materials. I love the silks. I love the gentleness of it. Um, but there were some things that, it definitely ended up being not the right choice for us.
Good to know. And I'm sorry to take you off course. And
No,
now
no, no.
but I just want to hand it over to you. Tammy has
Sure.
a presentation for us. And if you have any
Oh,
questions, put them in the chat. I'm going to hand it over to you, Tammy.
so I should go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, and do my little slideshow. All right, can you all see that? Good. Okay. So this is kind of like a whole morphing of what AZTYPO is and my story. So I'm going to talk a lot. And Jeannie, if anybody pops in with a question, you can just like throw it up there, interrupt me, whatever you feel necessary. Yeah, just go be like, stop. I have a question. I'm good with that. So you heard my introduction. My name is Tammy Stas. My pronouns are she, her, they. I am the executive director of Arizona Trans Youth and Parent Organization. I'm also a classroom teacher, Mesa Public Schools, fourth grade, not third grade now. Got to switch that in my bio. I've been teaching for, oh my gosh, a really long time. So yeah, I taught in the um, charter school system, and now I'm in the public school system. I've also been doing the executive director gig for, ooh, gosh, 6 years now. So a little bit of my worlds are melding now. So these are kind of our community agreements that I'm going to ask you to do as we move through this space, just to be brave and kind. If you see something, say something, recognize this is a space for multiple truths. Look for learning. Step a little outside of your comfort zone. You may hear some things where you're like, wow, I didn't know that. Take a new idea, find a new perspective. Maybe you find a resource you can take with you and learn a little bit. Practice examining those systems of bias. Look for things within yourself to address things that maybe you had some bias within yourself and change those. And also maybe move into action. Don't take what you learned here today and just leave it in the space, but take and share with others. Move toward change. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what AZTYPO does, and I have to brag a little bit. Yep, that's my kid throwing the flag in the air. I love that picture. That was our Pride, marching in Pride a couple years ago, and I just love it because it's like pure joy. and that's my youngest Bo. But basically, AZTYPO, what we do is we offer peer-to-peer parent support. So we're parent supporting parents. We're a purely volunteer organization, and our bread and butter is we offer 4 meetings monthly across the valley, 3 in person, 1 virtual. And they're in various locations so that we can serve the valley as best possible. We have 2 financial assistance programs. One is the Zach Ritchie Memorial Name Change Grant, where we will pay for the name change fees for youth up to age 24 to have their name changed. We find one of the biggest barriers is that name change, legal documents. We also have a gender junk grant, which provides up to $100 of gender affirming items, clothing, makeup, whatever someone needs. They apply, we purchase the items, drop ship them directly to their home. Some resources we offer are name change assistance, gender affirming care. We can connect people up to different resources, school support, and legal support, connecting people up to pro bono type things. All right, what we do, peer-to-peer support, grant programs, connect parents to resources. We kind of see ourselves as like a wheel hub. We may not have all the answers or the resources, but we can connect you up to different places that have them. We work with a ton of local agencies and coalitions that we formed. We work to educate and advocate for our kids and other kids in and out, in and throughout the state of Arizona. All right. All right. So that's a little bit about the organization I run. Now, who am I? I am a parent and an advocate. I was really honored this year because I won the Easily Spirit Award from Phoenix Pride. I was like so honored so I won the Advocate of the Year award. So these are some pictures of my family and some stuff I do. I'm one of our staunchest allies and partners in all of this work this last couple of years has been Governor Hobbs. And in the legislature, so lucky to have her in office. She's definitely been a firewall against so many things. A couple of our board members, and yes, those 2 beautiful people up in the corner, those are my children. That's Sam and Bo. All right, so what is our goal today? We kind of talked a little bit about this. We're going to go through awareness, capacity building, and into action. Shared terminology. I just kind of want to ask, before we start moving any further, are there any questions about any of these terms? I know that we've got a lot of people in the space who know a lot of stuff, but does anybody have any questions about these terms?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So if you do have questions, and I do feel like our crowd here on Fridays are pretty well versed in
Fabulous.
inclusive language. And I want to mention that our vice chair of the board of Secular AZ literally just donated to AZTYPO. So just so you know.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. We're a small organization, so every single dollar counts. All right. In the beginning with my kiddo. So my kiddo was assigned female at birth, and boy, were they wrong. Yes, pun intended. Pun intended. So this was my son in the beginning. And we tried to raise my child without any gender expectations. My kid liked to shop in the boy department. I didn't care. He loved pirate stuff. He was very artsy. You can see he liked to paint himself. His favorite canvas was himself. He was the happiest kid on the planet. I remember people approaching me in the grocery store and saying, "Does that kid ever cry? Does that baby ever cry?" And the answer I would give them was no. Napped like 3 hour naps, slept through the night at like 6 months. The easiest baby on the planet. I'm not kidding. Smiled all the time, happy constantly. Beautiful, beautiful baby. Love this kid. Yeah,
Hey, Tammy, real quick, there is
yeah,
a question.
yeah.
I do want, so Randy is asking, I do wonder how queer differs from other categories. So
Oh, back
going
to the
back to
terms.
that, yeah, going back to that slide, I don't see that there, but they clearly
It's
have a
under
question
the
about, yeah,
LGBTQ.
yeah.
IA.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So queer, it's a term that used to be like for the generation I grew up in, queer almost was like used as an insult. It was thrown around like you're a queer. But now what I see in today's youth is they're reclaiming it as like almost a term of power and an umbrella term where it doesn't matter what you identify. It's like a general term for everybody. They're part of the queer community where you can be multiple identities and you could be trans, you could be bisexual, you could be gay, you could be lesbian, or you could be a multiple identities and just be identifying under this queer umbrella. It's actually kind of a powerful thing. They just call themselves part of the queer community.
I actually recently had a discussion. We do a happy hour with a
Yeah,
bunch of other like atheist, agnostic, humanist groups. It was actually started by the Freedom from Religion Valley of the Sun chapter. And there was a gentleman there, and he said, because in his generation, he was like, he was like, I'm supposed to be offended by the word queer, so I'm
right?
confused that it's being used now. So I think that's an important thing to point out. Like,
Yeah,
it's like, when you take back the word, right?
yeah.
Like,
They've
yeah,
reclaimed the power of it.
yeah.
Yeah. And then like the plus at the end, the plus, we kind of honor the plus to say that language is ever evolving and changing and that terminology, you know, it's almost like on a daily basis. You know, people are identifying with different terms and different words. And we want to say that we honor that and that there is
Yeah.
no limit to what we put on it. You know, we don't just say LGBTQ, we say plus because we know that the rainbow is endless and that
Mhm.
we honor all of those terms.
Okay, that's the only question. I'm going to let you get right back to
All right.
it.
All right. So there's that beautiful baby. So that was the beginning, except for it wasn't all sunshine and roses. As you can see clearly from the face of that child, that is not a happy child. Whenever we put my kid in a dress, this was the expression on his face. You can tell he is not even 2 years old, not even 2 years old in that picture, and he is miserable. He was a flower girl in this wedding, and he did not smile the entire time. He knew something was wrong. We didn't. We didn't. We didn't have the language for it. But he knew. He knew. You can tell. I mean, if looks could kill, he would have killed. Something would have happened. Okay. So before we knew the words, him or me, this is kind of where we were. You can clearly see that he is definitely in the gender nonconforming. We didn't have the words, but I think if tomboy was the word we could have used. This is before my son came out. And he came to me in middle school and he said, Mom, I don't like boys the way you're supposed to like boys. I think I'm a lesbian. And I went, well, that tracks. That's about right. And he had been living very depressed. He had been hiding in his clothes. He had been sad, staying in his room. And I thought, okay, well, this is what's going on. And that lasted maybe about 3 months. 3 months until he went to Camp Outdoors, which is a camp hosted by the group 1 in 10, the organization 1 in 10. And he went to a trans panel. And here, I'll go back. And then light bulbs just started going off all over the place. And it was hosted by a trans man, and he just connections were being made. And at that point in time, he said, oh my gosh, this is me. This is me. I connect with this so much. And I tell people we dropped off my depressed lesbian daughter in the woods of Prescott, and I picked up my ecstatic over the moon transgender son 3 days later. Uh, that's how quick it happened. And he got in the car, and I got a list. I got a list of all the stuff. Now I saw a hand was raised. I'm sorry. There was a hand up.
I see that too. We ask that you just put your questions in the chat, folks. We do this webinar format, unfortunately, because we do unfortunately sometimes get, trolls and people who don't have good intentions. So
Okay.
if you do have a question,
Put it
Janie,
in the
feel free to
chat.
put it in the chat. Yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. So, so yeah, we went there and like I said, I picked up my ecstatic transgender son. And he was just like, oh my gosh. The clouds had parted, the fog had lifted. It was like the depression, poof, gone. He knew what was going on. He knew finally I figured out what was going on. And I mean, he ran up to his father and I with tears just streaming. And I mean, it still brings tears to my eyes. And this was 14 years ago, 14 years ago, and tears running down his face. Mom, I know who I am now, and I know what it needs to be done. I figured it out. And the list was long. The list was long. I need to change my name. I need to start hormones. I need top surgery. I need this. I need that. And his dad and we were thrilled to see that he had finally figured this out. But we had no idea what any of this was. We did not even know. I mean, the only trans person that I knew was Chaz Bono. I mean, visibility at that time was very low. The only public person I had ever heard of coming out was Chaz Bono. So, guess what I did? I immediately ran to the library and checked out Chaz's book because I needed to know. I'm a teacher, I do research. That's what I do. So, I started reading the book and I went, oh, yeah, this is my kid. This is my kid. This is what's going on. So I looked at the coming out process and I looked at, okay, where are we? So we started the process. And so we started a social transition. And a social transition is usually where kids start. And what we do when we talk to parents and we, have our meetings, we always tell parents, follow the child's lead. That's what we need to do. Your child is going to lead you on this journey. You're not leading the journey, the child is leading the journey. And so sometimes that's hard because sometimes you may want to move faster than your child does because we've got, okay, we figured it out. We know what we need to do. Let's do it. And the child may be like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. So a lot of times a transition starts socially. Changing a name, trying out a name. How does it fit? Changing pronouns. We're going to try maybe some gender neutral pronouns, maybe switching over to, the opposite gender pronouns. Clothes. It could be something simple as just changing your clothes or getting a gender affirming haircut. Medical transition, like blockers or hormones, that often comes after seeing a therapist, especially with a child. Typically, you do not start a medical transition until you have had some sort of counseling, gender affirming counseling with a therapist. Surgical transition. Now, in the state of Arizona, surgical transition is not allowed legally. There are laws banning surgical transition prior to the age of 18.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
If a young woman wanted to have a breast augmentation or even a breast reduction because they have, breasts that are too large for their liking, is that
Mhm.
allowed?
Is that woman a trans woman?
No.
Then yes, that's allowed.
Okay. Just wanted to
But
clarify
if
that.
that woman is a trans woman, no, that is not allowed.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There's if that person is of the opposite gender assigned at birth, then it is not allowed. Now, legal transition, that requires, those legal documents, name change, birth certificate, and any other legal documents such as social security card and passport. Now, the name change that goes through the courts where you're living. birth certificate goes through the courts where the child is born. Now, recently there was a ruling in the state of Arizona, which was fabulous for our families. It used to be that there was a surgical requirement in the state of Arizona. If your child was born in the state of Arizona, there was a surgical requirement to change the gender marker on the birth certificate. That surgical requirement has now been removed. They are in the process of changing their processes down at Vital Records, and that should be in place by May of 2025, where you can go in with a letter from your physician. That's basically the letter that all parents we have from our physicians that says our child is irrevocably committed to the gender that they are living in, and allow us to change the gender marker on the birth certificate without surgery. So we were not allowed to have legal documents for our children that reflected their gender prior to the age of 18, but now we are, which is fabulous. Any documents that go through the federal government were allowed to self-select gender, but state documents we were not. But now we can do it. It's great. It was a lawsuit that was about 7 years in the running. So, all right. So I talked a little bit about after the knowing. So what was that like? So this is a picture of my son on the left with the clothes he was hiding in. This was right after he came out. So oftentimes he would hide in his clothing. He would wear clothing that was very large. He had a lot of body dysmorphia. He did not like his body. He hid in clothing. He would buy clothes that were larger, cover up his body. In the beginning, our journey was very scary. It was isolating. It was lonely. We didn't have any families around us that were going through this. I would often try and talk to my friends about this, and I would get the, whoa, I really need you to stop because this is making me really uncomfortable and I don't want to hear about this. I don't want to talk about it. I just don't want to talk about it. No, stop. So it got to the point where I didn't have anybody to talk to. I had my husband to talk to, and that was about it. Until I went to a PFLAG meeting, and I was sitting in a PFLAG meeting, and I met a woman who had started an organization. And actually, I knew about her because they had published an article in the Arizona Republic about her and her son's story. And her son was trans, is trans. He's still around. Her son is trans, and she had started this support group for parents. And she was sitting across from me in the PFLAG meeting, and I had just read this article in the Arizona Republic about her. And I will be honest, I completely geeked out on her. I just went, "Oh my God, can you tell me everything? I want to know what doctor you go to. I want to know where you get this. How do you do this? What do you do this?" And she's like, "Come with me. I'm going to help you." And she just put her arm around me because at the time, I was told that if I picked up the phone and tried to get medical care for my child, I risked CPS showing up at my door and taking my child away because it was considered abuse to seek gender affirming care. So it was really scary. I couldn't just pick up the phone and call a doctor and say, "Hey, I'm looking for care for my trans child." So it was really hard. That was 14 years ago. We called it the dark times because there was no Phoenix Children's Hospital that had a gender clinic. There was nowhere to turn. And once I found her name's Tammy Jansen. Once I found her, it was just a huge relief. And so I started attending support groups. And these support groups were a parent organization that was held in conjunction with Trans Spectrum of Arizona. And Trans Spectrum of Arizona was an adult support group. And That's parent support group for the youth, then morphed into Arizona Trans Youth and Parent Organization. We branched off after that. So we turned into AZTYPO, which actually saved my kid's life. I honestly think, because if I hadn't found her, I don't know if I would have been able to get the care for my kid that I did.
Can I just interject for a second because like I'm just
Yeah.
thinking about your the isolation, the feeling of isolation, like you are alone. And not only are you just alone on an island, but you are also having to fight for every single like thing, like basic thing that your kid needs.
Oh, yeah.
A good friend of mine fled Texas, and Erin Reed of she puts out a Substack. She's a journalist, and
Oh,
she,
yeah. I know
you
her.
know who she is, right? Yeah, she puts out a map of the safest and least safe places, and Texas and Florida are she recommends don't travel there, do not. So the isolation factor of it all, and I don't want to take away because your presentation is, like I said, making me cry, but like I don't know, it's a lot of isolation. I can't imagine how you must have
It
felt.
was really, really hard,
Yeah,
because family didn't want to talk about it, friends didn't want to talk about it, and just being alone. It was really, really difficult.
yeah,
Really, really difficult. I was, yeah, it was one of the most lonely times, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry,
And
go
no,
back.
no, and just but once I found the community and once I connected to the community, it was, I mean, that was when it went to the amazing level, you know.
Yeah,
And I started connecting to the community and getting the help from my son. And the picture on the right, those two pictures are 4 years apart. One is pre-transition, one is post-transition. One is right before we started, and one is right after his top surgery. So you can definitely see the difference. And I have to say, once we got connected to the community and the people I have met, and it's just been amazing, surrounded by
geez.
community and the people I've lost, yeah, I've lost a lot of people along the way, but the people that have stepped in and taken their place, man, I would not trade that for the world. Not at
Mm,
all. Not at
yeah.
all. It's just it's been amazing. Yeah.
All right, I'll
Joy.
keep monitoring the chat and
Yeah,
you
no
keep
worries.
going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and the most important thing about the whole journey has been the joy and watching him become the person he is. Watching him. So, some of the reasons why we do what we do and why I continue to do the work that I do. My son is 26. He does not live in the state of Arizona anymore. He's an adult. So why do I keep doing what I do? Well, as Jeannie said, I am a lifelong educator. So here's some of the reasons why I do. I still work with youth. I know what it means to use a transgender youth's chosen name. I know what it means to see these kids supported in school. I know what it meant for my kid to be supported in school. And I know what it means for the kids that I work with. So it's like the 71% reduction in depression symptoms, the suicide reduction rates, the suicide attempt reduction rates. It is so significant. And that's just using their name. That's all it is, using their name. It's life saving. It's all you're doing is using a name. It's it that's it. That's it. So it was scary at first. There we go. I love this picture. He used to do that all the time. But and that's him, pre-transition. Yep. So, and again, this is a number I use all the time. I round it up to 60 because 57. I mean, 60 and 4 or 57 and 4. In non-supportive households, 57% is the rate of suicide attempt. 57%. But that rate drops to 4% in supportive households. 4%. That's less than the national average. So just supporting them by using names, pronouns, getting them, to gender affirming therapy and care, man, saving lives. We're saving lives by doing this work. I don't know. I may sound like crazy and passionate, but this to me is life-saving work. So, 82% of transgender individuals have considered killing themselves and 40 have attempted suicide. Yeah. And that's a huge number. But again, that number is reduced so significantly in supportive households. And I used to tell people, and I'm sorry, it still tears me up. I used to tell people, they're like, why do you do it? Why? I'm sorry. I would rather have my son alive than bury my daughter. It's as simple as that because it amazes me because I'll run into families who are like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. This is still my child. This has always been my child. No matter what, nothing has changed. Maybe a little bit of the packaging, but that's about it. He is still who he has always been. Honestly, he's more who he has always been. He is more authentically who he has been. And he's happy. He is happy. So, so this to me is the hardest thing I've ever done. Now, his transition, so easy. I mean, watching him blossom, I equate it to like a lotus flower. This hard, really hard, closed up thing blooming into just beautiful. Now, the hardest thing I ever did, and we'll talk about in a sec, gender affirming care, there's that 73% reduction of suicide rate with gender affirming care. And that can be anything from therapy, hormones, blockers, to gender affirming surgery. And for us, gender affirming surgery was part of my son's journey. And that was probably the hardest thing I did. And it wasn't because I didn't want him to have surgery. That had nothing to do with it. He wanted this from day one. Day one. I think the hardest thing for me was as a parent, I didn't have the knowledge early on. And maybe that's why I do the work that I do too, that I didn't have the knowledge because I could have stopped this. I could have stopped this. If I had known earlier, we could have put Sam on hormone blockers and he would not have had to have surgery. But because there was not the awareness when he was younger, we missed the window and he had to have surgery to be fully who he was in his body. And if I can help another family come to that awareness earlier, and I think I've done that for several families, then, you know, I've saved them some pain and suffering. So, but that was hard for me that we had to go through that.
I
So,
mean, also, you were doing the best that you could with the information that you had, I mean,
oh, 100%,
so
100%. But as a parent, you're always like,
I
oh,
know
we tend to beat ourselves up on that one, right?
for sure. Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
for sure.
where's
But
my crystal ball?
but like, that statistic though of 57% to 4% when you have a family that
Yeah,
accepts you for who you are, the
yeah,
numbers that you're presenting today are just like really incredible.
They're
So
shocking.
I
Uh,
just commend you for being that really good supportive parent.
Yeah. Well, and my husband who's up in the corner would be he'd actually be angry with you for commending him because he gets angry when people tell him what a wonderful parent he is for supporting his son because he's like, "Well, that's what you're supposed to do." He says that's how it's supposed to be. But these are some pictures of the surgical process. And down in the corner is the generation of Stoss men. They were all there when he had surgery, all there to support him. So we had to travel to Pennsylvania to get the surgery he wanted, but all of his granddad and his uncles and his dad were all there to support him as he got surgery. So it was pretty cool. All right. So medical transition, pre-transition, post-transition. How do they feel about themselves? And then also, I bring up that suicide rate a lot because that's a big part of this whole process, you know. And then back to the joy. This is my family, Pride. We spend a lot of time at Pride. I always say, I don't care if you come for Christmas, I don't care if you come for Thanksgiving, but if you're not there for the Pride Parade, we got a problem. You got to be there. We're always marching. So today, where are we? Ooh, where are we now? We all know the current culture, and this is in 2021, and legalized discrimination. And I've even lost count of how many bills were placed before the nation that were trans, non-binary, legalized discrimination. I recently heard there was a $10,000 bounty put on trans people in Odessa, Texas. It's dark out there. It's dark out there, my friends. It's a hard place to be. Um, it makes things very difficult. I will be honest with you, that is why my son no longer lives in the state of Arizona. He did not feel safe. He did not feel safe here. He moved to a state where he did. Um, he felt, and a lot of it was motivated by not this election cycle, but the last election cycle. He couldn't take it. He could not take his existence being discussed in the public forum. He left in 2020 and he went to Massachusetts because he got tired of seeing his existence being debated by people who did not know him. And he needed to be somewhere where he felt safe. And it's hard. I miss him, but he's happy. This is him. This is him. Sorry. He he recently got married. We were back there in October. His wedding was gorgeous. Um, that's his, God, it's so weird to say. That's his wife on the right-hand side of him. I have a daughter-in-law now, but that's his wife, Chloe, and he's a fisherman. He lives in Massachusetts. He's total nature boy. And you will often find him down at the river sketching. He's a potter as well. He's a ceramicist and he loves nature. So, yeah, he got married. He's living his best life in Massachusetts. So, yeah, he's a happy guy. So, if you have someone in your family, what can you do? What can you do? So, let's talk about the myths. You often hear myths surrounding gender diverse youth. One of the big ones is you'll hear they're performing surgery on children. Uh, no, we're not. In the state of Arizona, it's illegal to perform any sort of gender affirming surgery prior to the age of 18. So, no, no one's performing surgery. Gender is biological. No, sex is biological. Gender is a construct. It's no. They're too young. No, sex is set in the brain around 2 to 3 years old. You saw that picture of my son around 2 years old. You can tell he is not happy. Trans trending. This is a big one. You'll hear a lot of times that It's trending. Everybody's trans. Why is everybody trans? Um, if you look back, a couple decades ago, they said the same thing about left-handed people. Why is everybody left-handed all of a sudden? Well, it's because they let them be left-handed. They no longer force them to be right-handed. Back in the day, they used to force people, like I was saying about Waldorf, they used to force people to be right-handed. When they stopped forcing people to be right-handed, all of a sudden there were a bunch of left-handed people. Shocker. Kind of the same thing. Now that there is awareness around people being who they are, people are being who they are. And so you're seeing a lot more youth being comfortable with who they are. It is starting to level out, much like left handed. It's a phase. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Sometimes people go through different phases of their life, and that's okay. Sometimes people stay in one phase. It doesn't matter. We let them be who they are. Believe them when they say who they are. Let them explore. It's a journey. And transition regret. There is less regret over gender affirming surgeries than there is over knee replacement surgeries. I believe the regret over knee replacement surgeries, I'm not exactly sure of the statistic, but it's in the double digits, where gender affirming surgeries is in the single digits. So, transition regret is actually a myth. They'll often, when you see people speaking in the legislature, notice the names. It's often the same people speaking over and over again. There are some people that regret it, yes, but it's very, very, very few. All right. There is a connection between trans and autism. It's a slight connection. It does tend to have a connection to ADHD. There's some studies that have been done. If you're interested in looking up this, you can look at neurodivergent insights, trans and autism connections. Google that. You can find out some interesting information. It's 3 to 6 times more likely that trans individuals are to be autistic. All right. Frequently asked questions. I kind of go over these. How do you know what someone's pronouns are? Ask. That's a great question. Introduce yourself with your pronouns, and then they're more likely to introduce themselves with theirs. What if I mess up someone's pronouns or use language they don't accept? Apologize. Try again. Why should I share my pronouns if I'm cisgender? Because you can't assume that everyone in the room is cisgender, and you shouldn't. Whoops, went back. You shouldn't assume that everyone knows that you're cisgender. It's polite, it's inclusive. Is it okay to ask someone if they're trans or if someone has surgery? Oh, please don't. It's the same as asking someone, what's in your pants? What if I don't know someone's gender? Then you don't know someone's gender. It's okay if you don't know someone's gender. You just roll with it. And then any other questions that are coming up in the chat. And I love this quote by Janet Mock. When I was younger, I wish I would have been told more often that I was right and nothing was wrong with me, that I was deserving of everything this world has to offer, and that my visions for future were worthy of pursuit. Love Janet Mock. You should grab her book if you've never read it.
All right, we're definitely gonna have to take a look at that.
And then I'm going to put those up while we do questions because there's some resources if you have someone who needs help. And then I think we have a few minutes for questions.
Good, because there are a few that are coming in.
I
Um,
tried to talk fast.
I mean, there's a lot of information here, and especially, first of all, the only time I encounter ads is if it's on like YouTube and I can't escape them. But like otherwise, I don't watch sports. I've been hearing stories about the ads that have been coming from the, evangelical extremist people that are really focused on less than 1% of the population. So I'm really grateful that I don't see those ads, but I know that they exist, and I know they're spending an awful lot of money on demonizing a small group of individuals.
Yeah, less than 2% of the population.
Yeah. Um, okay, so Phil is asking, do you have any thoughts regarding the cast review out of England 2024? This is something that Aaron Reed talks about quite a bit, Aaron in the morning.
Yeah.
It, can you maybe give us a Cliff Notes version of what the cast review is and says?
So the cast review, now correct me if I'm wrong, but the cast review is the transition regret review.
I believe so. I believe
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I'm not mistaken, it's done by a select few, and it's not a very it's not a very diverse group that sample. It's not a very diverse sample. It's a very skewed study, and it's not an accurate study. Um, if I'm,
I'm gonna go ahead and put in like I'm just doing a quick search because
yeah, I'd
like
say you
when
have
it
Aaron.
came out, I remember, and this was so basically with the cast review, from what I understand, a bunch of like anti
Yeah, there you
trans
go.
folks. Yeah, that's exactly. Oh, thanks. Look at that. Lindsay and I, we have a Jedi mind meld happening here.
I
Yeah,
popped it in the thing. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, it from my understandings from reading like Aaron Reed, it was a very small sampling, not an accurate sampling.
it was incredibly small, is my understanding.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I want to say, wasn't it 100, maybe less than 100?
yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
as far as scientific studies go, you can go ahead and read what Lindsay has posted into the chat,
yeah.
because it's a critique by other like scholars and clinicians and whatever who basically, said, well, this is a flawed study.
I hate to say,
I think about it the same way that I think about like I mean, we both had Waldorf kids, right? Like we had a bunch of those people who were anti-vaccines, and it was because that one autism study that came out like
yeah.
in the 90s, and everybody kind of freaked out about vaccines, and here we are, decades later, and we've got a whole contingency of the population who's like
I
absolutely no
mean,
vaccine,
I hate to come out and just say it's trash, but it's trash. I mean, there are certain things that people pull out at certain moments to back up what they want to say just because it proves their point. But that's what the CAS study was done for. It was done to prove a point, and it's an incredibly flawed study of a
and
very
dangerous and
micro
dangerous.
sample of people that just was done to prove a point. And it's not accurate. It's not good research. It's not good science. It's bad. It's
It's
bad science.
biased. Yeah.
It's bad science.
Okay, I've got
I mean,
another.
that's my
Yeah,
personal opinion.
I agree with you. And I think maybe I should read a little bit more about it, but I mostly read, and I know Erin Reed. I know like, that she is a huge trans advocate. So, but I think it for me at least shows that I maybe need to read a little bit more about it. There's another question here coming from Mark. Let's see. What reliable and accurate statistics are there as to what the percentage of our youth currently is trans, LGBTQ, etc. now, as compared to previous generation? Oh, this is an interesting question because as compared to previous generations, I would imagine that people didn't say a lot of this stuff.
Well,
So,
yeah.
is there an accurate representation of like, what our society has been as far as LGBTQ, like, people who are gay, people who are lesbian, people who are trans? I mean, I feel like maybe we're
Well,
seeing, I think there's just more visibility, but
Well, I think so. And I mean, it's really hard to tell, Mark, because there hasn't been a lot of accurate collection of SOGI data, sexual and gender identity data, because we still don't have the resources that are collecting that data. So, I mean, we can't really say there's an accurate representation of that data. Um, there's nobody collecting that data. I mean, as far as like schools aren't collecting that data. Medical, some have started collecting that data, but it's really a lot of self-reporting. And I'll be honest with you, there are a lot of people that aren't self-reporting that data because they're scared.
mhm.
They're
Oh
scared.
yeah, I mean, if you're in a state like Texas or Florida, you're not gonna talk about it.
And at this point, in like Texas or Florida, you're risking incarceration if you're reporting that data.
Hmm.
So I can't say that there are any accurate sources that have that data. We've been,
Okay.
there's actually, when I say we, the coalitions I'm part of and the organizations that I work with have been calling on governmental organizations to start collecting that data
Hmm.
because it hasn't been done yet.
Okay. Okay, we've got another question here from John. From your description of, well, he says Ian's early childhood, but I think they mean your son.
Sam,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, Sam. Hold on just a second. Where to go? Where to go? Hold on. I'm gonna get there.
Mhm.
What reliable? Okay. What reliable and no, no, no. Hold on. I'm sorry. This is my feed isn't quite right. Okay, I'm looking for John. There it is. Okay. From your description of Sam's early childhood, it is clear that transgenderism is genetic, nature rather than nurture. Are there other examples from your family history?
So there's no other individual in my family history that I'm aware of that identifies as trans. I do have another child that is femme non-binary identifying, but as far as like any of my ancestors or my husband's ancestors, no, we do not have any trans relatives. No.
Okay. Let's see. There's more question.
Unless they were in a
There's also just a lot of praise for you, Tammy, just so you
Oh,
know. I mean,
thanks.
I I don't normally cry this much on a Friday. But yeah, I'm crying today. Yeah, the ads are gut-wrenching. Everybody's just praising you. Beautifully shared, Tammy.
Oh,
Kern
thanks.
is Kern just isn't towing the party line. He's genuinely sadistic towards trans people. Yeah, it's true.
I
Um,
agree.
Oh, okay, good. The contact information is up there, so that's what somebody asked for.
Oh,
Farrell is
and
asking, do you see connection? Oh boy.
here, I'll
Do
put
you
my
see,
contact there.
Tammy, do you see connections between Christian nationalism and transgender discrimination?
Well, yeah. I see a very bold straight line between the two. Sadly, I do. And I'll be honest with you, I don't understand it. I don't understand the fascination with the Christian nationalism with our kids. I don't understand it because I'll be honest with you, when my son first came out, nobody cared. Nobody cared. I mean, I had Christian friends who were like, we love you. We love your family. We love your son. This is fantastic. You know, as Christians, we love everybody and you're going through this and how can we support you? And I mean, they're still with us and they're still there, but I don't know if they would feel the same today if he came out today. And we
Yeah.
have we have families without, you know, disclosing any personal information or anything. We have families that come into our support groups that one of the biggest struggles, and I mean the biggest struggles they face is rejection from their faith communities. And because they've been such, you know, strong members of their faith communities, and that's where they've, you know, raised their kids and their families, and oftentimes it's generational that they've been parts of these faith communities, and instantaneously after their children have come out, I mean, it's like a switch is turned on. You are done. You are no longer a part of our faith community if you do this.
Mm-hmm.
They are instantly rejected and turned away. It's not even a how can we help you? How can we support you? It's instantaneously. They are thrown to the curb.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking because like it's generational. They have been raised in these, you know, both parents, and they are just, you know, lost as to what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
How we live in these communities. We, you know, this is our life. And we have been completely shut out and turned away.
Mm-hmm.
This is our family, our friends, every part of our life. And now it's like we've been excommunicated completely. We have to
Mm-hmm.
build a life over or risk, you know, or turn our back on our kid.
Mm-hmm.
Those are our choices. And
So I've got
because,
a
yeah,
go ahead.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, I've got a comment here. So there is somebody in the audience today who said that Jennifer says, I would love for you to tell Sam's story at my company. We are very progressive. So you do have Tammy's contact
Yep,
information right
right
there,
there.
Jennifer. So I
Reach
hope
out.
that you, yeah, reach out. Um, Erica Kepler, who is another fantastic activist.
Erica,
She says, let's avoid the use of the term transgenderism. It was created by conservatives to
yes.
predict or depict gender dysphoria and transgender people as a political ideology. Thank you for that, Erica. Honestly, thank you so much because terminology these days is very, very important. And I mean, we're past 1 o'clock. I hope you're okay with time.
Oh,
I'm
I'm
super
good.
sorry, but I'm telling you, another person saying thank you. This helped me with stuff I'm working on regarding my kid who is trans non-binary. Mark says, yes, excellent presentation, really gets it down to the personal level, showing just how the ignorant white Christian nationalists are. Let's see. So let's see. I want to read what this says first. Sex segregated sports are still normalized in ways unacceptable in the rest of society. Can we transform sports and physical education so that
Right?
non-athletic kids like Howard was, as well as trans kids caught up in the team sports controversy, can just enjoy physical activities without
Leave.
any regard to their gender, their height, their innate strength, their athletic ability? Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Agreed.
Oh, look, here's Pam. Pam says, I remember you and Sam and his sister from the Waldorf school. He was always more comfortable in the boys' cargo shorts. Uh,
Yes, I remember you too, Pam. Yes, he was. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you, those boy line and girl lines threw him so much.
I mean, right? And I worked at Persian Garden Cafe. Joseph Jafari's dad, Mahmoud.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and in Farsi, it is a non-gendered language. So like it happened frequently where Mahmoud would refer to me as he or they or whatever, and I was just like, at first I was confused. Like sometimes he would refer to his wife as him, and I was just like, and Joseph actually was like, there's no gender in Farsi, so that's why. I wish we could all have languages that were non-gendered, right?
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Yes. It'd
Let's
make it a
see.
lot easier, wouldn't it?
Yeah, more than anything today is just an outpouring of love and support. And
Oh, thank
Jay, this
y'all.
is my favorite quote right now. Jay says, I am smarter because of today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
So this is great. Pam points out that the UU community is very affirming and accepting. I would also go to
Yeah.
bat for the Quakers and UCC. I mean, I'm not a fan of going to
Yep.
church, but if you are, those are going to be your most welcoming
Well,
spaces.
I will tell you, my son got married at a Quaker retreat. So, yep. Yep.
Oh my goodness. My house guest, who's travel, she's a voluntourist, I would call her. And
Yeah.
she's here to try to flip our state blue. So she is I took her to the Quaker house over on Glendale the other day. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, Tammy, I'm so sorry, folks. I know like people have dropped off of
Oh,
this conversation because it's
we're
so
just
late.
chatting.
But what gives you hope these days?
What gives me hope? Oh, Tuesday. Tuesday.
Tuesday.
I'm lighting every candle I got. I'm, saging everything I can. Tuesday. I am. I knocked on every door I could. I've talked to everybody. I've sent people have, I guess the term would be voting coach. Um, I have sent your list to everyone who's reached out. I have coached multiple individuals. So Tuesday.
Hell yeah. Oh my gosh,
Tuesday.
Tammy. I appreciate you so much. I am
Great.
so glad that our activism have brought our paths back together.
I
And
know. I know. That's pretty awesome. I love the circles that come full circle. Yeah.
I know, right? And I will be at every damn Pride event that exists. So I hope
Yes.
you all have a great Friday. And Tammy, just thank you so much for
You're
being
welcome.
so open and vulnerable with your story and with Sam's story. We appreciate you so very much.
Oh, and thanks for having me. I always love chatting. Yeah.
Always. All right.
Um,
All right, everybody. Till next Friday when we find
all
out
right.
the results and we have all the hope from Tuesday. So have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.
Okay. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.